So I work in the trees, that's how I make my living, and I choose to live in the forest. So trees are a pretty big part of my life. I couldn't imagine living in a different type of environment. I mean, I've been surrounded by trees my entire life, and the times of my life that I didn't have trees around me, I just couldn't wait to go camping or hiking or backpacking and get out into the woods and breathe. I mean, I feel so much more alive when I'm surrounded by the trees. I mean, trees are life. Without the trees, we wouldn't have anything. We wouldn't have topsoil. We wouldn't have good stuff. So anyway, long and the short of it is this is my little home site up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. There's my wood shop and my camper van. But not too long ago, like a month ago, this area was entirely different. We experienced a snowstorm like I have not seen in all the years that I've been up here. We got 2 feet of snow in 12 hours, and it just kept coming and coming and coming. At first it was beautiful. I thought, all right, I love it when it snows. But what I wasn't expecting was the trees were not used to all this extra weight. I mean, we've experienced about 10 years of drought, and then all of a sudden, boom, we've got all this heavy weight on the trees, and trees were falling down everywhere in the woods. I lost at least 20 big trees on my property, and hundreds of branches went down. Yeah, I just caught that one. So anyway, I got my drone out. It's been a while since I got my drone out, and I wanted to go and take a look at some of the damage that was caused by all this snow. You wouldn't believe it. I mean, it spent 2 days just clearing my driveway. I had so many trees down. I brought the chipper down here. I used the Bobcat. It was, just so much work. And some of the trees, even some of the trees right around my house, they got hit pretty hard. There was big branches down on the ground. So with the drone, I was able to go up and get a little better idea of some of the rips and the tears and the branches that are missing. And all these voids on the top of this large canyon live oak are areas where there were branches before. You couldn't see through this tree. I've got some old drone footage, I should have brought that up, that shows the entire canopy is nice and dense and full all the way around. And there are still big branches that are broken and just hanging up here. So I spent quite a bit of time with the drone looking and kind of evaluating. And it's almost more work than I can possibly imagine. So a lot of people ask me about living in the mountains and living in the trees, and they say, aren't you afraid? Well, I don't know if fear is the right word. I respect the trees, and I understand that things happen, and that unusual weather anomaly like we just had has not been common for a long, long time. Yeah, there's my home site down there. You can see I'm just completely surrounded. Life in the mountains, you just can't beat it. So at this point, I'd like to take you to a job site. You know, this channel is about trees and tree care. But I'd like to talk about different topics. And today, the topic is going to be a little bit about wounds and proper cuts. I know I've talked about this ad nauseum in a lot of my videos, but I think I need to repeat myself. Where should you make a cut on a tree? What is the branch bark ridge? What is a flush cut? Well, I'm going to show you a couple of examples. I started a cut on a job that I did just yesterday, and I decided to take a before and after picture. And I want you to recognize that the best way to make a proper cut is to leave enough of what's called the branch bark ridge so that it can encapsulate the wound. And it's important to recognize that wounds do not heal. What they do is they absorb the area. But if you leave enough of that branch bark ridge or the collar then what it'll do is it'll create a smaller triangular area of wound that doesn't spread all the way down through the trunk. Well, not always, but every tree is different too. And that's another thing that we need to talk about. Some species of trees are recognized for being rapid decayers, like birch trees and silver maples. I can go on and on and on. But other trees, like the tree we're working on from yesterday's job, the sycamore, the Platanus acerfolia, that is a species of tree that will absorb the wounds, and oftentimes even a bad wound, without too much decay. Now, that being said, I run into hollow sycamores all the time, but frequently this is a type of tree that gets cut back severely or pollarded or trimmed in such way that you would expect a different reaction. I don't know if any of you have heard of the circus trees. You know, they're in Gilroy right now. They were all transplanted, but years and years ago, there was a man who created these abnormalities. He cut and he sliced and he bent and he grafted and he did all kinds of odd things. And the tree that he chose for these oddities was the sycamore, because it was recognized that that species of tree will tolerate wounds better than a lot of other trees, and it'll absorb the wounds and carry on. So let's go jump up into a sycamore tree and I'll talk a little bit about it. Well, let's get back to work. Here I am up in a sycamore tree. It's the Platanus acerfolia, also known as the London plane tree. These are some pretty significant trees. They're downtown San Jose. They were planted in 1938, and the whole street is lined with these giant trees. And they've been worked on by multitudes of different companies and people in this city for such a long, long time. And it's kind of interesting because I get an opportunity to look at some of the old wounds up in the trees and see how they're doing. I'm up in the bucket, get a little bit of a bird's eye view straight down. So this is a cut that I made and I cleaned it up. And what I like to say is, don't cut flush to the trunk. That's called a flush cut. That leads to long-term internal decay. I oftentimes will leave what a lot of people will call a bit of a stub, but it's leaving the branch collar. And some of the decisions that I was making up in this tree were based upon what I was finding. This is what an old wound is. Now, whether or not that was a flush cut or not is hard to say at this point in time, but clearly there's a weakness here. This was another area that was obviously very, very weak. This branch had died, and interestingly, the decay spread all the way down the trunk, so I did end up removing this branch entirely. And that's my dog, Hank. I'm home from work. Good old Hank. Are you hungry? Do you want to eat?